Reprise de débat. Resuming debate. The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I begin my remarks, I'd like to thank my colleague from Bow River for bringing forward this motion. I think it's far too often governments at all levels forget that farmers are conservationists. In everything that they do, and I can say we do because that was my background, Madam Speaker, is that they work to protect biological life and ecosystems. Without the soil and water to grow the crops and graze their livestock, nothing would be possible. Whether drafting legislation or regulations on environmental policy, we must always include Canadian farmers as part of that conversation. They understand that the land and water better than anyone else, and that's why I applaud the member from Bow River and believe this motion is long overdue. As my father used to say, if you take care of the land, it will take care of you. Those are the words that every farmer lives by. Across this great country of ours, there are thousands of ranchers and farmers. From PEI to British Columbia, the agricultural industry is at the very core of Canada's economy. Beef producers in Manitoba, grain producers in Alberta, and apple growers in Ontario all understand that caring for their land is the key to long-term success. And it is imperative to point out that farming is not just an occupation to pay the bills. It is a way of life as well. Unlike many other jobs, there is no such thing as 9 to 5 or Monday to Friday job while on the farm. Most of all, farming is in almost every circumstance, is a family affair. During seeding and harvest, calving or haying, everyone has their tasks. They work long hours. They work in whatever conditions that Mother Nature throws at them. There are many reasons why I am supporting this motion, but first and foremost is that I believe the voices of farmers need to be heard on conservation and environmental policy. I would argue that the current Liberal government has let down farm families in some of those areas. They have stopped listening to the constituents who make a living from working the land, and there are many examples of how they've let farmers down, such as their proposed tax hikes that'll make it harder to transfer the farm from one generation to another. In fact, they've scheduled their so-called consultations right in the middle of harvest, Madam Speaker, and if the Liberal government thought they were going to quietly hike taxes without anyone noticing, they obviously were wrong. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals also announced in their budget that they would want to completely eliminate cash grain ticket deferrals. The current cash purchase ticket system helps farmers to stabilize income from year to year to ensure the long-term sustainability of their operations. Running a farm is no easy task. It means taking serious financial risks while dealing with conditions outside of your control, such as weather, market prices, and transportation bottlenecks. And now the Liberals are about to impose a massive carbon tax that will cost the farm's families thousands of dollars. We know that their national carbon tax will cost over $5.8 billion, just to put the emphasis on that, $5.8 billion, Madam Speaker, per year, and the taxes collected will rise to $30 billion by 2022. The Department of Agriculture has also put out a memo and predicted farmers will see fuel prices rise by 10 to 20%. And that tax will cost farmers up to $3,705 more per year on average. It is disappointing the government did not stop to think how they can work with Canadian farmers to reduce greenhouse gases. Instead, their knee-jerk reaction was to slap a new tax on them. I think we can all agree, Mr. Speaker, that we're starting to see a trend here. And that's why this motion is so important. It is time the federal government looked to farmers as full partners in establishing policies that support and encourage the development of private farm land and ranch land conservation projects. Instead, we have a government that looks at them as tax cheats. While it is probably too late for the Liberal government to regain the trust of farmers, I believe that through the motion, we can begin the process of involving them in the larger discussion of how we can further improve conservation efforts. We already know that most farm operations are working to protect the environment for the next generation and following generations. In Manitoba, many farmers are working with their local conservation district or have received funds for such things as shelter belts. We know that through technology and innovation, farmers are using fewer resources while improving yields and keeping costs down. Many farmers have implemented new ways to reduce soil erosion, such as using no-till practices. That way, they do not disturb the soil until they plant the following spring. Such things as old corn stalks and wheat chaff are left on the top of the soil. This helps conserve the soil by leaving it intact so that it cannot be washed away by water or blown away by wind. The no-till method can produce high-yielding crops in areas of low moisture due to the soil staying intact. This method can better manage crop protection products, labor and time, as well as a large decrease in water usage. We also know that beef producers are managing their pasture land to ensure sustainable and viable operations for the long term. Producers are using management practices and promote the health of the animal and the environment by protecting water sources and working towards improved forage practices. In my constituency of Brandon-Souris, many beef producers are using land that is unsuitable to grow crops such as wheat, canola, and soybeans. Either such land is too sandy or is densely wooded for traditional crops, but that doesn't mean it doesn't play a role in the overall ecosystem and the agricultural industry. Instead of tearing down the trees or using massive irrigation systems, beef producers are using the land to graze their cattle. Nevertheless, there is still pressure being placed on converting some grazing land into crop production. There are 5.9 million acres of grasslands in Manitoba. This is 1/3 of the total farmland in the province. We know that compared on a price per yield basis, grasslands cannot compete as well with returns on annual crops. While input costs continue to soar and there is a federal government in power that is intending to raise taxes, there is no wonder why some farmers are looking at converting their grasslands into crop production. Through this motion, the federal government can firmly state that beef producers and all farmers are vitally important in conservation efforts. To expand on the importance of grain and livestock farmers, I would like to highlight a recent University of Manitoba report that estimates the socioeconomic value of grasslands in Manitoba to be $936 million annually, with a range of $702 million to $2.6 billion per year. The report goes on to note that the key to preserving pasture and hayland resides in recognizing the increasing value of grasslands. Furthermore, the socioeconomic value of grasslands must include the ecological goods and services, in other words, the many benefits grasslands provide to the environment and to society. However, even though it is widely acknowledged that grasslands are worth more than just the value of the forage produced, defining and assigning a dollar value to that worth is complicated. To my good friend to the north, the member from Parliament for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa, has been a strong proponent of an alternate land use services program that involves working directly with farmers and landowners. I echo his calls, and that's why it's so encouraging to see the new Progressive Conservative government of Manitoba get behind such a program in which landowners will be paid to retain or reconstruct natural areas such as wetlands, grasslands, and riparian areas near rivers. So instead of the stick approach, such as the Liberal carbon tax, which will only economically hurt our farmers and ranchers, we can use the carrot approach and further enhance what many are already doing. We know that carbon storage is quite high on perennial grasslands. The carbon is stored in the soil and is in the extensive root system of perennials accumulating over time. When accounting for the net total amount of carbon stored in Manitoba grasslands, it is estimated at 250 million tons. That's a lot of carbon being taken out of the air, while also providing the necessary pasture land to support beef production. It's also important to highlight that another report put out by the University of Manitoba found that Canada's beef industry continues to become more efficient. The report stated that beef producers have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 15% in the last 30 years, which means that the same kilogram of beef you get at the grocery store now has a smaller greenhouse gas footprint. Researchers from Agriculture and Agri-Food and Environment Canada also found that there has been a 15% decrease in methane, 16% decrease in nitrous dioxide, and 13% decrease in carbon dioxide from beef production in Canada over the last 30 years. Comparing the same time periods, it took 29% fewer cattle in the breeding herd and 24% less land to produce the same amount of beef, Madam Speaker. We must never also forget that pasture lands are the home of many species and wildlife. Our beef producers are already working with various wildlife organizations and are having a tremendous positive impact. Any tangible way farmers are improving conservation efforts is by keeping, or another way is by keeping livestock out of streams and rivers, and so doing so, they are reducing the amount of nutrients that could potentially end up in the water, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So, Madam Speaker, in closing, we
Has run out of time. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, the member has run out of time.